Let's be brutally honest for a moment. The entire concept of an Iraqi dinar revaluation has been, for years, mired in a swamp of wild speculation, broken promises from self-proclaimed gurus, and a profound lack of concrete, actionable intelligence, leaving many investors frustrated, skeptical, and on the verge of walking away from what they perceive as a lost cause. But I am here to tell you, with a sober analysis of cold, hard facts and a clear-eyed view of the geopolitical chessboard, that everything has changed, and the single most significant catalyst for this change is not a rumor or a prophecy, but a documented, actively implemented policy shift from the Central Bank of Iraq that is systematically dismantling the very architecture that has kept the dinar's value artificially suppressed for decades. This policy, which we can accurately call the Great Dollar Divorce, is a strategic, multi-phased assault on the legacy financial system that was built in the aftermath of the 2003 invasion, a system designed for control and oversight, but which ultimately became a cage preventing Iraq's economic sovereignty. The core of this old system was the compulsory use of the U.S. dollar for all international trade, including Iraq's most vital asset, oil, a process that was managed through the New York Federal Reserve and a complex web of regulations that effectively made the Iraqi dinar a local currency with no international role or standing. Think about the profound implication of that for a moment. A nation with some of the world's largest proven oil reserves, a nation sitting on a treasure trove of other minerals and agricultural potential, was forced to conduct all its serious business in a foreign currency, which inherently limited the demand for its own currency to its internal domestic economy, an economy still struggling with corruption, infrastructure decay, and political instability. This created a permanent and structural weakness, a fundamental disconnect between the true asset, backed wealth of the nation, and the perceived value of the currency its people used every day. And it is this very disconnect that the new CBI policy is designed to correct with surgical precision. The mechanism is twofold and is already underway. First, the CBI has dramatically and intentionally reduced the volume of U.S. dollars it sells to private Iraqi banks in its daily currency auctions, a move that has sent shockwaves through the financial sector and forced these banks to seek alternative sources of foreign currency, thereby integrating them into the global financial system and weaning them off their dependency on the central bank's dollar handouts. Second, and far more crucially, the government, under direct instruction from the CBI, has begun mandating that a growing portion of domestic transactions, including for key imports like electricity from Iran and even certain types of government procurement, be conducted in Iraqi dinar instead of U.S. dollars. The data from the Central Bank of Iraq's own publicly available financial statements reveals a startling and deliberate trend, a sharp increase in the value of its foreign currency reserves, not just in dollars but also in gold and other major currencies like the euro and Chinese yuan, while simultaneously the monetary mass of Iraqi dinar in circulation is being carefully managed and tightened. This is not the behavior of a central bank content with the status quo. This is the behavior of a central bank building a war chest, fortifying its defenses in preparation for a major monetary event. They are accumulating the necessary financial firepower to defend a new, higher exchange rate against speculative attacks and to ensure sufficient liquidity for international trade once the dinar becomes fully convertible. Every single step pressuring banks to clean up their act and comply with international anti-money laundering standards like ISO 2022, to the gradual but unmistakable narrowing of the gap between the official government rate and the black market rate on the streets of Baghdad, is a calculated move in a grand strategy. The narrative that Iraq is perpetually on the verge of collapse is a dangerous and outdated illusion. The reality visible to anyone who cares to look at the raw data and policy directives is that Iraq is methodically executing a long-term plan to escape its economic prison. And the key turning point, the linchpin holding everything together, is this new, aggressive policy from the Central Bank of Iraq that is creating the necessary conditions for a revaluation, not as a speculative fantasy, but as a logical, necessary conclusion to a decade of reform. Now, to fully grasp the inevitability of this process, we must shift our gaze from the internal mechanics of the Central Bank of Iraq to the immense, often unyielding, pressures of the global financial ecosystem. Because the revaluation of the dinar is not merely an Iraqi ambition, it is a fundamental requirement for the nation's survival and integration into the modern world economy, a requirement being enforced by powerful international institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which have drawn a clear line in the sand regarding what Iraq must achieve to qualify for critical debt relief, new lines of credit, and most importantly, the foreign direct investment necessary to rebuild its shattered infrastructure and diversify its economy beyond the precarious oil industry. The IAF's article, IV Consultations with Iraq, which are publicly available documents, read not as general suggestions but as a rigid checklist for monetary reform. And the top item on that list for years has been the absolute necessity of unifying the exchange rate and eliminating the complex system of subsidies and currency restrictions that have fostered a thriving black market and crippled the growth of a legitimate private sector. This external pressure is the engine in the machine, providing the political cover and the technical guidance for the CBI's tough domestic policies, creating a powerful feedback loop where every successful step Iraq takes towards compliance is met with increased confidence from international creditors and a slight easing of the financial noose, which in turn empowers the government to take the next, even more difficult step. The recent and highly significant move towards connecting the Iraqi banking system to the International Digital Payment Messaging System, STU-IFT, and specifically adopting the more robust and data-rich ISO 2022 protocol is a perfect example of this symbiosis. It's a non-negotiable demand from the international community to increase transparency and combat money laundering and terrorism financing, but it is also a powerful tool for the CBI to monitor in real time every cross-border transaction, effectively giving them an unprecedented level of control over the financial flows that were once opaque and susceptible to corruption. This newfound transparency is a game changer because it allows the CBI to build a credible case for the dinar's true value based on real economic data and legitimate trade flows, rather than the distorted picture presented by the previous system of off-book dollar transactions and a rampant parallel market. Furthermore, we are witnessing a deliberate and strategic diversification of Iraq's foreign currency reserves away from an overwhelming reliance on the US dollar, a move that is as much about geopolitical realignment as it is about economic prudence. By actively accumulating reserves in euros, Chinese yuan, and gold, the CBI is insulating the future value of the dinar from the potential volatility of any single currency and, more importantly, signaling to the world that Iraq is open for business with all global powers, not just the West. This recalibration of economic alliances is crucial context that is often missed in simplistic analyses. A revalued dinar is not just about making current investors wealthier. It is about positioning Iraq as a stable, financially sovereign hub for the reconstruction of the entire Middle East, attracting capital not only from Europe and America, but also from the colossal investment funds of Asia and the Gulf states, all of whom will require a strong, stable, and convertible local currency to fund the billions of dollars in projects needed for everything from electricity and water to transportation and telecommunications. The data flowing from Iraq's Ministry of Planning regarding projected economic growth, when cross-referenced with the CBI's reserve management and the IMF's compliance reports, paints an undeniable picture of a nation methodically checking every box on the path to monetary normalization, and the final unchecked box is the one labeled unified market-reflective exchange rate. The narrative that Iraq is too politically unstable, too corrupt to achieve this is being systematically dismantled by a year-over-year improvement in its financial governance indicators, a quiet but relentless march towards legitimacy that is setting the stage for what can only be described as the most significant currency reset of the 21st century, an event that will ripple through global markets and redefine the economic landscape of the entire region, proving that the political will, backed by international necessity, is now undeniably present. So we arrive at the final and most critical question: what does this convergence of internal resolve and external pressure actually look like in its final execution? And how will the seemingly overnight event of the revaluation unfold in reality, transforming from a theoretical endpoint into a tangible, bankable fact that alters the global financial landscape and the lives of those who have positioned themselves for this historic shift? The mechanism will not be a sudden, mysterious announcement from a shadowy figure, but a technical, well-telegraphed financial operation executed by the Central Bank of Iraq, likely in close coordination with the International Monetary Fund and major global central banks to ensure stability and prevent market chaos, beginning with a formal public statement that the conditions for full convertibility have been met, followed by the immediate suspension of all trading in the Iraqi dinar on the current electronic platforms for a pre-announced brief period, perhaps 48 to 72 hours, to allow for the technical reset of all international banking systems and foreign exchange rate feeds. This temporary pause is the overnight period everyone references, a necessary blackout during which the back office systems of every major bank from New York to London to Hong Kong will update their databases, changing the official ISO currency code IQD from its current artificially low value to a new fixed rate that will be vigorously defended by the CBI's newly fortified war chest of foreign reserves and gold. This new rate will not be a random number plucked from the air. It will be a carefully calculated value derived from a sophisticated assessment of Iraq's true economic potential, a metric known as the purchasing power parity, which measures the relative value of currencies based on the actual cost of a standard basket of goods and services in each country. And when you apply this model to Iraq, factoring in its colossal oil and gas reserves, its vast and untapped agricultural land, its phosphate and sulfur deposits, and its young, ambitious population, the resulting figure is a multiple of the current crisis-era exchange rate, a figure that accurately reflects the nation's fundamental wealth rather than its recent troubled history. The immediate aftermath of this reset will be a period of intense volatility and scrutiny, which is precisely why the CBI has been building its reserves to astronomical levels to act as a market maker, using its financial firepower to buy up any speculative sell-offs of the dinar and maintain the new peg, demonstrating to the world that this is not a temporary float but a permanent, defensible new paradigm for the Iraqi economy. The ripple effects will be instantaneous and profound. Suddenly, the Iraqi government's budget, once strained when converted from dinars to dollars for international payments, will be massively inflated in its international purchasing power, allowing it to fund reconstruction projects without taking on catastrophic levels of debt, while the personal wealth of every Iraqi citizen whose savings and salaries are in dinar will see a dramatic increase in their global standard of living, empowering a consumer boom that will attract multinational corporations and create a virtuous cycle of investment and growth. For the global market, the emergence of a new, strong, oil-backed currency will provide a fresh asset class for international investors and a new reserve option for central banks looking to diversify away from the traditional dominance of the dollar and euro, fundamentally altering the geopolitics of the Middle East by creating an economically independent and powerful Iraq that is no longer financially tethered to any single superpower. This is the real endgame, far beyond the profit of individual investors. It is the culmination of a 2-decade-long project to bring a key nation in a volatile region fully into the fold of the global economy, using the tools of monetary policy as the primary instrument of national rebirth and stability. The countdown is no longer measured in years, but in the final few policy implementations and compliance reports, and the evidence is now so overwhelming that to ignore it is to ignore one of the most significant and predictable financial events of our lifetime, an event built not on hope, but on the irreversible momentum of policy, data, and global necessity finally aligning to correct a historical anomaly and unleash the true potential of a nation and its currency upon the world.